Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go.
Now, all of us understand the importance of optional subject in overall scheme of UPSC Civil Services examination. And if you're confused about which optional subject to choose, how to find the best teachers and academic support for your optional papers, and above all, how to prepare for the same during these difficult times, Rouse IS has best solution for your optional subject related problems. We are conducting optional orientation sessions on 22nd and 29th of May 2021, in which you can learn from the Rouse IS teachers about how to prepare for the optional subjects and how are we going to help you in scoring your best in the mains examination. The optional batches are starting from 4th of June 2021 via live online classes. Consider this as a call to all of those who wish to completely cover the optional subject by December 2021. This will ensure timely coverage of optional subject, and then you can focus your attention completely on prelims from January or February 2022 and keep revising the optional subject till you appear for the mains examination. Rouse IS is offering guidance for political science, public administration, history, sociology, geography, economics, and psychology from Delhi, Jaipur, and Bangalore centers. In the description of the video, there is a link which you can use to register yourself for the orientation for the respective optional subject session. We at Rouse IS are committed to give you the best guidance and academic support to excel in civil services examination. Join the orientation and kickstart your mains optional subject preparation from a team of best teachers in the arena. Let us now begin the discussion.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's DNS session. We are going to have a discussion on today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition dated 16th May 2021. We shall pick up articles important for civil service examination and discuss them as per the demand of the exam. The articles that we shall take up for discussion is there on your screen and the time stamping for the same is given in the description section. There's a news article on page number 9. Mars landing gives China's space program a leg up. See, the news is China has successfully landed a lander making a soft landing on the surface of the Mars. The lander was landed on a large plain region located in the northern hemisphere of Mars called as Utopia Planitia or Utopia Plain. China began its first Mars mission somewhere in June July last year. And since February last year, its mission called as Tianwen 1 has been orbiting around the Mars. Then this orbiter was made to come out of the orbit, and yesterday landing was done of the lander. From the lander will come out a rover that will rove over the surface of the Mars and collect information. The rover is called as Zhurong. The Chinese pronounce it like Zhurong. With this, China became the third country to have landed on the surface of the Mars. Previously, US and Soviet Union has done this. But the lander of Soviet Union could communicate only for few seconds after landing. So remember, only 3 countries have landed on the surface of Mars: Soviet Union, US, and China. But there are only 2 countries that have able to send rover on the surface of the Mars: US and China, not Russia. Only United States of America's rover presently are roving on the surface of the Mars, and China's rover will begin in some day. The rover of China, Zhurong, has not started roving. The lander is presently taking the picture. It will map up the surface. It will find out where the surface is relatively plain, where there is absence of crater, and then the rover will actually be asked to rove. NASA sent its rover way back in 1976, Viking 1. That was followed by Viking 2. Then in the coming decades, they sent the rover Opportunity and Spirit. And presently, their rover Curiosity and Perseverance are roving on the surface of Mars. So US has sent so far 6 rovers. This is China's first, Zhurong. There is no third country to have rover on the surface of Mars. Taking this opportunity, let me tell you the present missions to the Mars. There are 11 spacecraft on the surface of the Mars or orbiting around the Mars. They are from 5 nations or the Union: United States, European Union, India, China, and UAE. NASA has presently 2 functional rover, Curiosity, and a technological upgrade of Curiosity, Perseverance. There is one lander, Mars InSight, And NASA has additionally three orbiters: Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Mars Odyssey, and MAVEN. India has one orbiter, Mangalyaan 1. European Union has two orbiter, Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. China so far had one orbiter, Tianwen 1, as we have talked about. But now this orbiter has been made to come out of the orbit, do a landing. So China presently, to this day, has one lander on Mars. That is the only mission of Mars. In few days, China will have one rover on Mars, Zhurong. And UAE also recently has successfully sent an orbiter called as Hope. At any given point, Mars has more number of missions than any other planet or star, or any other mission for dedicated purpose to study astronomy for any part of the universe. So the question to beg is why the scientific community is fascinated with Mars. There are many reasons for this. See, Mars is considered to be a planet where life may have evolved in the past. Because as per our study, it has been understood that conditions on the early Mars, roughly around 4 billion years ago, was similar to that on Earth. For instance, the planet had thick atmosphere. Because of high atmospheric pressure, H2O could exist in the liquid form, and streams and rivers of water have been flowing on the surface of Mars because we have evidence of presence of deltas. So we come to understand that life could have existed there, and maybe even today we can find some traces of life below the surface. Mars' physical feature is also very similar to Earth-like features. For example, presence of clouds in the atmosphere, polar ice caps, volcanoes, and Mars also has season. But because Mars comes at number 4, it takes more amount of time to revolve around the sun, so the seasons are longer on Mars. If you come to think of it, Mars is the only planet that can gather so much of attention from the scientific community. Because the inner planet Venus and Mercury, they are too hot. The temperature there is around 400 degrees Celsius. So you cannot think of human habitation under such extreme condition. And the outer planets like Jupiter and Saturn, they are made up of gases and not silicates or rocks, and they are very cold. The only planet that we can think of having human habitation in remote future is Mars. Temperature there is approximately 20 degrees Celsius at equator, and the poles are too cold with minus 125 degrees Celsius temperature. There are many Mars mission in news, so for the coming prelims examination, you must just take note of some feature of the planet Mars. From your class 4th knowledge, you would know that Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun, and it is second smallest planet in the solar system. Mars is about half the size of Earth. Mars rotates every 24.6 hours, which is very similar to one Earth day. Just like Earth, Mars also has axial tilt. The axial tilt of Earth is around 23.5 degree. Mars has an axial tilt of 25 degree. And because of axial tilt and revolution around the sun, there are seasons. But the seasons on Mars are obviously longer than that of Earth. Mars is also called as the red planet. The red color of Mars comes from the rusting of iron in the rock and some dust in the atmosphere of Mars. We have seen previously that Mars has some physical feature like that of Earth, for example, volcano. And incidentally, Mars also has the largest volcano in the solar system. It's called as Olympus Mons. It is 3 times taller than Earth's Mount Everest. We have seen previously that once upon a time, some 4 billion years ago, atmosphere of Mars used to be thick. But for some reason unknown to us yet, atmosphere of Mars has been leaking into the outer space and it's becoming thin and thin. So because of less atmospheric pressure, H2O cannot exist in liquid form there. So we do not see water on the surface. But you must know that this thin atmosphere is made up mostly of carbon dioxide, around 95%. And we have small percentage of nitrogen and argon gases. There's a very important thing about Mars that you must bear in mind. Mars does not have magnetic field, the kind of magnetic field that Earth has. You know, Earth has a kind of magnetic field that resembles the magnetic field of a bar magnet, like this. This is the pattern of magnetic field of Earth that protects us from the ejections coming out of the sun. But this kind of protective magnetic field does not exist for Mars. Although some of the rocks found on the surface of the Mars, they have magnetic field. But planet as a whole does not have protective magnetic field like this. Mars has 2 moons, one called as Phobos, the other Deimos. The picture of Phobos showing its crater was sent recently by Mangalyaan 1. This news on the cyclone Tote is on page number 1. This cyclone is intensifying, and by the time it reaches Gujarat, it will be having speed of around 160 km per hour. The cyclone Tote, when it originated in the Arabian Sea, it was categorized as cyclonic storm, but the Indian Meteorological Department has to revise its status to very severe cyclonic storm. Cyclonic storm has a speed of around 62 to 88 km per hour. Severe cyclonic storm has a speed of around 80-89 to 118 km per hour. If it exceeds 119, comes in the range of 119.20 to around 220 km per hour, it is called as very severe cyclonic storm. Cyclone Tote is a very severe cyclonic storm. There is destruction impending. Indian government has got its act together to prepare and minimize the loss. Cyclone Tote has developed as a depression over Lakshadweep area near the latitude of 11 degree north. The reason why I'm mentioning this is you would know that cyclone requires Coriolis force. And with the help of Coriolis force, the wind in the cyclone starts rotating. It rotates in anti-clockwise direction in northern hemisphere and clockwise direction in southern hemisphere. You would know that at equator, the Coriolis force is zero. And near the equator, the Coriolis force will be very small. It does not give that swill, that rotating movement to the wind. So cyclone cannot originate in and around equator. Cyclones always originate at least 5 degree north or south away from the equator. So after originating in and around the region of Lakshadweep, it actually headed northwards. And then it headed northwest. But then it will take a turn again and will hit Gujarat. Because of this kind of motion of cyclone, Gujarat traditionally always have been prone to cyclones. The basics about cyclone genesis, as to how it is produced and what are the prevailing conditions that it requires to form, that was previously discussed by Pallavi ma'am. I'm adding that clip here for basic understanding of cyclone formation.
Now, in front of you are the 6 most crucial factors that are responsible for the formation of tropical cyclones. Now, the first and the most important factor is the sufficient warm temperature at the sea surface. Now, this temperature should be minimum 27 degrees Celsius, because it is because of this low pressure region gets formed in the Bay of Bengal that later takes form of a cyclone. Next important factor is that pre-existing low-level focus or disturbance. Again, this refers to a pre-existing low-level pressure systems that exist in the Bay of Bengal that later take the form of a cyclone. Now, the third important factor is Coriolis force. Now, Coriolis force refers to the deflection that is caused due to the movement of the earth. Now, this is anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere, because of which when winds flow from high pressure areas towards the low pressure areas where the depressions are formed, they actually get deflected towards the anti-clockwise direction, giving rise to swirl-like formations which later results in cyclonic formation. Further, the next important point is high humidity in the lower to middle level of the troposphere. Now, it is the continuous supply of these warm moistures from the sea that acts as a fuel for this cyclone to continue its existence. Now, as soon as the landfall occurs, that is when these cyclones hit the land region, they dissipate within 5 to 6 hours as their source of fuel, that is the moisture, is cut off. And this is what has happened in the case of Nivar cyclone. Now, next important point is upper air divergence. Now, cyclone are low pressure formations that have an high pressure opening at the top. Now, as the winds from high pressure area due to the pressure gradient force reach the low pressure areas of the sea, they rise and give rise to what is known as cumulonimbus clouds. These cumulonimbus clouds are a result of the upper air divergence, which is the high pressure area that exists directly above the low pressure area in the tropopause region of the atmosphere. Now, the last and important factor is the absence of low vertical wind shear. Now, wind shear refers to the difference in the horizontal speed of the wind that is flowing from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. Now, if the speed of the wind vary, then it is very difficult for the eye of the cyclone to form, since this tunnel-like formation will not be possible. Hence, these are the 6 factors that are responsible for the formation of the cyclone. Now let us try to study the various stages of the cyclone formation. Now at the initial stage, the cyclonic storm depends upon the transfer of water vapor and heat from the warm ocean to the overlying air. Now this is the depression that is formed. Now the initial stage of development of the cyclone involves rise of convection air that includes the water vapor from this area of the warm ocean surface. This rises and condenses to give rise to cumulonimbus clouds at the tropopause. Now these vertical cumulonimbus clouds are a result of convection and condensation. Next we move on to the mature stage. Now at this stage the storm intensifies as the air rises with vigor. Now when this condensation takes place, there is a release of latent heat. Now this latent heat release further strengthens the low pressure at the bottom, giving rise to a self-sustaining system. Now moving on to the last stage, which is the modification or the decay stage. At this stage, the cyclone begins to weaken as it hits the landfall. That is the time when the cyclone moves from sea towards the land. Its source of fuel, that is the sea water or the warm surface water vapor, is no more available, as a result of which within the time frame of 5 to 6 hours the cyclone dissipates, and this is what is expected of the Nisar cyclone as well. Now this is how a vertical section of a tropical cyclone looks like. Now this represents the low pressure area and the eye of the cyclone. These reflects the cumulonimbus clouds that are formed. Here is the tropopause where the high pressure region exists, and here is the divergence of the wind at the top of the troposphere. So this is how a vertical section of the tropical cyclone Nisar looks like.
Now you would have understood, for cyclone the fuel is actually heat trapped in water. That heat is present in the form of potential energy. That potential energy is converted into kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy gives a speed to the wind of cyclone. So the speed to the cyclone is coming from where? Heat. And the heat will be increasing because of climate change. So cyclone's intensity and its rate of formation will also be increasing because of climate change. And we have been seeing this. The severe cyclone frequency has been increasing in northern Indian Ocean, both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. 3 times. Previously, we used to get 1 severe cyclone a year. But in last few years, we have been getting 3 severe cyclone in the Arabian Sea itself every year. In 2020, there were very severe cyclones both in Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. For example, the cyclone Amphan, it turned into a super cyclone in just 24 hours. And just about a week after Amphan, we had a cyclone Nisarga. It was formed over Arabian Sea and struck the coast of Maharashtra. Then in the post-monsoon season, we had cyclone Nivar, hitting the Coromandel coast at Puducherry. These were cyclones of high intensity. The frequency and intensity of cyclone has been increasing. Since 1980s, after the launch of remote sensing satellite mission of India, we have been recording satellite data. And for the first time, it has been the case that the pre-monsoon cyclones have been recorded over Arabian Sea for 4 consecutive years. These observations you can keep in mind for your mains examination. Additionally, the speed at which Tote is intensifying, it bears out the effect of global warming. So there is no doubt that climate change has its effect on increasing the intensity and frequency of cyclones. But let's specifically talk about warming Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea traditionally has been cooler compared to Bay of Bengal. You can see in this heat map, in the Bay of Bengal region, the colors are mostly red. The yellowish portion is very little. But in the Arabian Sea, this yellowish region, this is dominating in the northern region and in the central western region. So what happens if when storm originates, it loses its heat, its energy, its intensity as it moves further. And that is why Arabian Sea historically has been comparatively less prone to cyclonic storms than Bay of Bengal. The cold sea surface temperature of Arabian Sea is not favorable for the development of cyclone because it is the energy stored as heat in the water molecule that is used for cyclogenesis. But the temperature study over the Indian Ocean suggests that Indian Ocean is warming, and particularly Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea is warming at the fastest rate compared to other seas in the region. Ever since the global warming effect started to be felt, we know that the temperature has been increasing. And it is a fact that you should know that the global ocean has absorbed 90% of excess heat that has been generated by greenhouse gases. So, this obviously has resulted in ocean warming. If ocean warms, the water molecule above the ocean also warms, and those water molecule, the warm moisture above the ocean and seas, they are used to intensify cyclones. They turn the potential energy stored in the water molecule in the ocean to kinetic energy. You just previously saw the condition for formation of cyclone, it requires warm water. It requires the temperature of water to be above 28 degrees Celsius for tropical cyclones. And the temperature of Arabian Sea, as per the recent bulletin of IMD, is around 30-31 degrees Celsius. This is anomalously high. The temperature of Arabian Sea is increasing more rapidly than any other sea. The question is why? The answer lies in the limited capacity of Arabian Sea to dissipate accumulated heat. The ocean currents in the region are not very strong encompassing the region. The water mass is kind of trapped by the land masses. Cyclone formation in Bay of Bengal has been high. Because of greater depressions forming in comparatively larger water mass, there is also greater effect of monsoon in this region. Also, the region gets some amount of tornadoes coming from Japan and the other Pacific regions. So the air circulation for these reasons in Bay of Bengal is higher. So heat dissipation has been higher. The heat dissipating capacity of Arabian Sea, however, is less. So the temperature has been building up. Now the temperature has built up to such an extent that the intensity and frequency of cyclone is only to increase. But when the frequency of cyclone increases, then the heat dissipation will begin and the water of Arabian Sea will start to cool. But it will take around 10 years for the water of Arabian Sea to cool down. And until then, we can only expect more frequent cyclones coming to our western coast. There is an article on the Science and Tech page of today's newspaper. The new approach combines biologics and antibody drug conjugates. And this new approach that combines biologics and antibody drug conjugate is called as protein antibody conjugates. The protein antibody conjugate, which is a new system which is under research for the protein delivery into the cell, and it combines the aspect of what is known as biologics and antibody drug conjugates. There is an article on the Science and Tech page of today's newspaper. The new approach combines biologics. We'll talk about what these uncurable diseases are, but let's understand first of all these two systems individually. What is biologics and what is antibody drug conjugates, so that we come in the position of understanding protein antibody conjugates. Biologics basically is based on the idea to target a defective protein in the system, which is not getting delivered to different part of the body. For example, if pancreas is stopped making insulin, there is not much of a problem because one can take insulin shots. The reason is that the insulin goes into the bloodstream. So if insulin is not produced by pancreas, you directly inject insulin into your bloodstream. And whosoever wants to pick up insulin from the bloodstream will get it from there. So the reason why insulin shot works is the circulation of insulin happens outside the cell. If you have a demand of insulin inside the cell of the body, these insulin shots will not work because these insulin shots get insulin into your bloodstream. But from bloodstream, how will it be taken up by the cells? Anything cannot get inside the cell so easily. For example, you have a cell here and you have multiple things in the bloodstream. They can come and touch the cell and go. But getting into the cell is not an easy thing. One, because it's all fluid. It is difficult for things which are flowing in the bloodstream to get latched up with the cell. And unless you get latched up for a long time, your process of getting inside the cell will not begin. Getting inside the cell is a very complicated process, but the process begins with step number 1 of getting latched up on the cell by some means. For example, virus first of all gets latched up on certain protein on the surface of the cell, and then the process of endocytosis, getting inside the cell, begins. In case of SARS-CoV-2, it is a protein on the surface of the cell called as ACE2. SARS-CoV-2 first gets latched up to this protein and then the process of endocytosis begins. So for your protein or drug to get latched up to the cell's surface protein and then the process of endocytosis beginning is a complicated thing. It's not an easy one. We have more than 20,000 proteins that we know of that have certain roles to play. And if these starts to malfunction or not being produced, then it's not easy actually to deliver proteins inside the cell. And since we are not able to do it, certain diseases are uncurable. We know exactly what needs to get inside the cell. We know the material. It's not that we do not know what needs to be done. It's just that we are not able to do it. And hence we are not able to cure the disease because we do not know the means and ways through which our drug or protein will get inside the cell. In order to overcome with this problem of getting your drug inside the cell, new technology came up called as antibody conjugates. Antibody, it gets attached with antigen. Antigen is any part of foreign body. Anything that body does not recognize is antigen. Be it virus, any other pathogen, even the cancer cell. On the cancer cell, on the surface, you have certain proteins protruding outwards. And it is recognizable by the antibody that this is not how the body cell is supposed to look. So whatever extra protruding is outside the cell, these becomes antigen. And corresponding to antigen, there will be antibody. There's something called as monoclonal antibody, meaning antibody being produced for one particular antigen. You can have an antibody corresponding to this antigen. Suppose, for example, this could be the shape of antibody so that it fits to this part of antigen. In laboratory, there are ways to produce only one particular kind of antibody. You make one antibody and then you start cloning it. That is called as monoclonal, meaning you will have a production of only one kind of antibody. So antibodies naturally have shape that fits into antigen. And if you produce an antibody that fits into these antigens outside the cancer cell, then you can reach to the cancer cell and gets attached to it. Monoclonal antibodies also survive in the bloodstream for a longer period of time. So they have a greater chance to meet these cancerous cells with these antibodies. Once the antibodies meets the cancerous cell, they get attached to the antigen on the cancerous cell. And if they hold on for quite some time, then the process of endocytosis will begin. Antibody will slowly and gradually get inside the cell. So now you understand, if you have a drug attached with these antibodies, they will also get inside. Once the antibody gets inside the cell, in the cell cytoplasm, you have something called as lysosomes. Lysosomes has many proteinases. These proteinases, they have to break down the proteins, maybe of proteins of pathogen, maybe the proteins of food molecules. They just dissolve and break down proteins. And antibodies are also made up of proteins. So the structure of antibodies inside the cell will be broken by lysosomes. And when everything is broken down, your drug molecules will be in the cytoplasm. This is how drugs are delivered inside the cell using antibody conjugates. And then your drug can do whatever you have designed it for. Now what we are trying, instead of these drugs, we may have proteins. Why? Because proteins are used for signaling process. The only thing is that it is a lot more difficult to attach proteins to antibodies than drugs. Because sometimes the proteins that you require will have a very complicated structure. It may be planar. And that protein to be attached with the antibody in the manner and the way that it does not perform its function when it is in the bloodstream, but only perform function when it is broken down inside the cell. That structuring, the building that structure is little difficult, and research on exactly that is going on. But it is possible, it seems possible. Theoretically, if drugs can be taken inside the cell, so proteins can also. But proteins can be used for cell signaling. So it seems possible to get proteins inside the cancerous cell, and those proteins can start the cell's signaling process, maybe to carry out apoptosis, which is a kind of signaling mediated cell death, so that the cancerous cells they die. This basically is what protein antibody conjugates. With this, we have come to the end of the session for today. Answer to yesterday's question of the day and today's question of the day is there on your screen. Please attempt the question, post your answer in the comment section, and there are some good quality questions in today's DNS quiz, so please attempt that as well. Goodbye, take care.